Now, we've got a ton of religions in the world. How do we know which one's true? How do we know which one I should follow? Let's take a look at the next slide. This is the world religion affiliation. 31% of people in the world are Christian, or at least self-identify as Christian. 23% self-identify as Muslim. 17% are unaffiliated, agnostic, atheist. 15% are Hindu. 7% are Buddhist. 6% follow folk religions like folk Islam or folk Chinese religion. 1% are others, and I know Judaism, it says 0% there, but it rounds down to 0. There are Jews, they do exist, but it does round down to 0. So this is the breakdown. How do we know what to follow? Do we just pick one? What about the other religions? Let's go to the next slide. These are the major worldviews. Unaffiliated isn't one that we're going to discuss here, although I do think it's a worldview. Now, when I was a Muslim, I had to consider these 6 worldviews, and I had to think, okay, why would I start investigating Christianity and Islam? Well, I think one really good reason to start with those 2 is if you pick 2 people in the world, one of them is going to be either a Christian or a Muslim. Over 50% of people in the world are either Christian or Muslim. So it's a good couple to start with investigating. But there's another reason why. If we go to the next slide. Christianity and Islam are the 2 major world religions that provide tests for you to see whether or not they're true. When it comes to Hinduism and Buddhism, these are very interesting religions. In fact, if you talk to scholars in Hinduism and Buddhism, a lot of them are very hesitant to say that these are actually religions. Buddhism, for example, Buddhism doesn't actually revolve around a theology. Theology comes from the word theos, which means God. There is no central God figure in Buddhism. But it's not quite atheist either, because they do have a spiritualist view, a supernatural view, and they do have an idea of gods, but it's not like our God. So it's really complicated to talk about what Buddhism is. Same thing with Hinduism. It's got a lot of a national flavor to it. Indians are Hindus. A lot of them are, and it's really hard to extract Hinduism from India. By the way, I grew up speaking Urdu in our home. My parents are from Pakistan. That's what they speak. In Urdu and in Hindi, the name for India is Hindustan. It's land of the Hindus. And that's actually where you get the word Hindu from, and India. So it's really tied to this national geography. It's not really a religion you can test. I remember when I was in university, I had a friend named Zach. Zach was a Buddhist. And I was challenging him to become a Muslim. I gave him all my reasons why he should become a Muslim. And I asked him in response, I said, okay, now that I've given you my reasons why you should become Muslim, why should I become a Buddhist? And his response was, well, Nabil, Buddhism doesn't really say you should become Buddhist. It's a way of approaching the world. It's a way of interacting with it. I really don't think that Buddhism says you should become Buddhist. And then I said, okay, I won't. Thanks. There really is nothing to latch onto, to test. Judaism, I would say the same thing. Judaism, in fact, actually, does that mean I have 3 minutes left? Oh. We'll skip Judaism. We'll skip folk religions. We'll go to Christianity. Okay, Christianity actually provides tests for whether or not it's true. If you look at 1 Corinthians 15, Vince has quoted it a few times. Here's what it says. If Christ is not risen, our faith is in vain, and we're of all people most to be pitied. What is Paul saying? He's saying, look, the resurrection, whether it actually happened, determines whether this faith is true. I want to put this in context of my story for you. When I was a Muslim and I was trying to determine whether or not Christianity was true, I looked into where we could build a case for the Christian religion. There's a lot of Christian beliefs, but is there a case for the Christian religion? And I found it in Romans chapter 10, verse 9. Here's the case. This is what Romans 10:9 says. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. All right, there's 3 things. Confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Notice, all 3 of those things are things that would have happened in history. Did Jesus claim to be God or not? That would have happened in the first century. Did he die on the cross or not? That would have happened in the first century. Did he rise from the dead or not? That also would have happened in the first century. This isn't like Hinduism or Buddhism where you have to just assume certain truths about the universe. These are things that actually would have happened or not. They're historical. So we can open up the pages of history to determine whether they've actually happened. But this forms a case. Look at it this way. When I was working in the psychiatry ward as a medical student, people would come in and they would have delusions of grandeur. And when I was interviewing them, some of them would say to me, "I am God." And my response would be, "Okay, come on in. We've got a room for you. It's padded and locked." If someone claims to be God, that's pathological. It's okay to think they're crazy. When Jesus claimed to be God, it made sense that the Jews said, "No, you're crazy." But then Jesus said, "Wait, I will prove it to you. I will show you the sign of Jonah. I will rise from the dead." Now, if someone says to me, "I am God," I'm going to think they're crazy. But if they say, "Wait and see, a few days from now, I will rise from the dead to prove to you that which I've been saying," okay, I will watch and see, do you rise from the dead or not? Now, if Jesus actually rose from the dead to prove his claim that he is God, we have excellent reason to believe Christianity is true. I looked into it historically. As a Muslim, I didn't want to believe any of that. In fact, the Quran told me not to believe it. The Quran says, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. He was not killed, Jesus, nor was he crucified. Chapter 5, verse 72 of the Quran says that if you believe Jesus is God, you are going to hell. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was that strong. I had a lot more to say, but apparently I speak much more slowly than I thought. Let's go to the last slide. Christianity is testable. It passes the test. It makes sense of the world, and this is what I want to end with. What is it when we listen to music, when we watch movies, what is it that we see? What is the theme that seems to be pervading our music, our movies, our poetry? What is it? Love. It's love. By the way, if you go to countries where women are all wearing burqas and men have long beards, they're doing the same thing. They're singing about love too. It's true. It doesn't matter where you go throughout history and in time and space, people are singing about love. They're yearning for love. Why? I'll tell you why. It's because we are made in the image of God, and God is love. 1 John tells us God is love. Well, how can God be love? I really wish I could spend more time on this. Maybe we could do this during the Q&A. But the only reason why God can be love is because he's a triune God. God exists as a community of love, three persons in one being, loving each other eternally. It's in his very nature to be love. And then he creates us in that image of love. That's why we yearn for love. Listen, that's why we want to care for people. That's why we want to build wells in places where people don't have water. That's why we want to go build homes for people that are homeless. That's why around the world, our generation is striving to express love to people. We're looking for meaning. And we're being told in the universities that we are cosmic accidents. There's no meaning there. But in the Christian worldview, you are made in the image of a God who is love. And that God was willing to enter into this world and die for people who could do nothing for him. And then he says to us, "As I have loved you, so love one another." We are meant to love one another. We're built to love one another. And only in the Christian faith is that the case.